Hello and welcome to the shed. I'm back again. Another stream I was on. Let me just see who it was. Who I was on with. I was on. Let me just see how I get this. Sorry about this. I was on Ryan Apologetics 747 channel. This was a couple of days ago that I was on that channel and had an interesting conversation with Ryan and also the other guy that was on there, who was John Arthur. Interesting conversation with him. Starts off a little bit slow, but it does build up. It turns into quite an interesting conversation. So without further ado, what I'll do is I'll add that stream to this. You can watch it. Let me know in the comments what you think. Let me just add this to it and get it going and get myself out.
Reference to the other scriptures from a high level to try and come up with something that works, that everything interlocks and works.
Yeah,
so you've got it there. Yeah, you've got it on your definitions there. Word, the sayings of God. Yeah, God said something in the beginning. God said something. The question is, what did he say?
Well, like one of the first things in Genesis, let there be light. That's kind of what I'm saying. I would perceive as an example of him and Christ, the Son, creating. In the beginning, God said, "Let there be light." He's creating the light through His Word. That's how I view it. But Paul, how do you, as an atheist, view these type of verses? I know you're going to view it differently than me and John, but how do you view like John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God?
Yeah, I mean, obviously my position is I don't believe any part of the Bible when it comes to the creation of the earth, the universe, mankind. No, it doesn't mean anything to me whatsoever. And when it comes to Jesus, I mean, clearly I don't think that he's the son of a God, because I don't believe a God exists or ever has done. Was he a real person, or is he a mythical figure? I'm starting to slowly. I haven't made my mind up yet, but I do understand the arguments of Jesus being a mythical figure, and I can't dispute what they say about him being a myth, and he does sort of like fit in with being a myth. I think there's more evidence that Robin Hood existed. Oh, clearly is a mythical figure. Some people will argue that Robin Hood actually existed or was taken from a particular person. I think there's more evidence for that than there is for literal Jesus. But did Jesus actually exist? I can't say.
Paul, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Did Christians exist in the first century, or is that mythical?
No, I think there's enough documentation to say that Christians did exist in the first century. Yeah, with is it Tacitus and what's the other one? Josephus. They both mentioned Christians, so yes, I would say that there probably was.
It's very well attested to. Very well attested.
Yeah, but them two people were only talking. There were. Because I know they mentioned Jesus, both of them, and it's quite often used as evidence that Jesus existed. Now, them two people that I just mentioned, Josephus and Tacitus, they were alive when Jesus was on the earth. So, and all they were doing was reporting on what Christians believed at the time. So, as far as I'm concerned, they're not evidence for Jesus whatsoever, because they weren't there when Jesus existed, and all they're doing is reporting on what Christians at the time believed, which would only be the same as if one of us was to report on what the Mormons believed, and we were to write down things that the Mormons believed. Now, that wouldn't mean that we believed in it. We were just reporting on what the Mormons believed. And in several thousand years' time, somebody finds documents that we have written, and they use that as evidence that the Mormon religion must be true, because these two people, or that we know existed, they were talking about them at the time. Again, it wouldn't be evidence. And to me, Josephus and Tacitus and people like that are only evidence that Christians existed, not that
Okay.
the religion is true or that Jesus even existed.
Let me ask you a few questions, Paul. Let's just get a bit of a backwards and forwards going, because I think I can prove you, just from your answer to me, we're going to prove that Christ must have existed. Okay.
Okay, yeah, that would be interesting.
So, right. So we've got the writings. So we know there were people that called themselves Christians, which means they were followers of Christ.
Yeah.
So you're trying to say they were followers of a mythical man, not a real man.
Like I said, that is not my position. I'm sort of starting to lean to that sort of thing now. I do find it interesting about Jesus being a myth, but at the moment, I would have to say, if someone were to say, "Did Jesus exist?" my honest answer would be, "I don't know."
Okay, right. Now, there was a lot of persecution of those Christians, and Nero persecuted them, because when there's a fire in Rome, he blamed it on the Christians, and then that started a massive persecution. Yeah, horrible torture, getting them to try and recant their faith. This was within 30 years of the cross, just over 30 years. Do you think it's reasonable that somebody would endure being burnt alive, or having their head chopped off, or eaten alive by lions, if they didn't think Christ was real?
100%.
They would have to have believed Christ was real.
Yeah, they would have to believe that Christ was real, but that doesn't mean that he was. It just means that their belief was extremely strong, and I wouldn't dispute that. There's people now that will do the same thing. 9/11. Now, they were Muslims. They believed that what they were doing was right, and they believed that they were going to go to their equivalent to their heaven. Now, to me, I cannot dispute they must have absolutely 100% believed that. To do what they did, they must have 100% believed it. Now, that's the same as what you're talking about with these Christians that took the persecution. They were tortured. They were threatened with death. They were thrown in with lions, got their heads chopped off. They were willing to do that because they honestly believed that what they believed was true. And I wouldn't dispute that.
What about the writings, like the letters? Like Paul wrote a lot of letters, are in the New Testament.
Again, I wouldn't use Paul as any evidence, because Paul never met Jesus.
Hang on, can I finish the question? You jumped in very quick there.
Well, yeah, because you're using Paul as
okay. What about Peter then? Peter was one of the disciples that was with Jesus. Was he, when he wrote about Jesus, is he basically a con man, making it all up, trying to? You see, basically, your argument has to be that these people, who gave away all their possessions, who ended up being martyred, they were all the biggest con men on the planet. What did they get out of it? What was the benefit to them? They didn't make any money from it.
I suppose the same as con men do now. There's a guy living out in Russia somewhere who claims to be Jesus now, and he's got 5,000 on this. Today he's got 5,000 followers, and he's got 3,000 that actually live with him in a communion. Now you would say that he's lying. He's not the real. He's not the second coming of Jesus, which he claims to be. Now he's got more followers than what your Christians did back in the the first 100 years. His following is.
That's not true. That's
certainly his followers are bigger than when Jesus was actually supposedly alive and living. He's got 5,000 followers now. I don't think 5,000 followers of Jesus were back 2,000 years ago.
Well, in one day, 3,000 on the day of Pentecost, 3,000 Jews became Christian in one day.
Right. Okay.
I think, but to be honest,
we've got two examples of two people. One's alive now and he's got 5,000 followers, and one was 2,000 years ago. How can I determine whether the guy that's living now is telling the truth? If I can't prove that he's lying or telling the truth, which we're going to all presume he is lying, how am I ever going to be able to investigate whether this so-called Jesus 2,000 years ago was telling the truth? I think just the fact that people believed it to me, that's not evidence. And
I think it's more the fact they were willing to die for it, and letters were written.
People are willing to die for
letters were written. So basically, you're saying Peter, Paul, James, they were all lying.
Hold on, I don't want to interrupt your guys back and forth. So I just want to put in one point on, the objective, what I see. What about the Aztecs and those type of people that were willing to sacrifice their children or sacrifice themselves? Or we could look at all these cultures all over the world that believed in mythical deities, and they were willing to die for them and do things. So I agree with the fact of what you're knowing what we know, John, as far as where we're at with it, where we understand in our hearts and souls what we believe and know is the truth in our hearts. It's more powerful to show the martyrs of Christianity, because it obviously is something that is very, dear to us, and it makes sense because it's the ultimate testimony of your faith in God. But to just be objective and fair, human beings have been willing to sacrifice their children and do things for evil deities and all sorts of things, even within the Bible. So, like, how you can see where Paul's coming from with that alone not being persuasive for him, right?
Well, it's a different argument, really, Ryan, because that's killing somebody else.
But what about dying for yourself?
No, I would say that's a more powerful argument. I could not kill my child for belief. I could kill myself for belief, but I couldn't kill my child for belief. And if they're willing to do that, no, I'd say that killing your child is more of a proof of your faith than it is to kill yourself. Absolutely.
But that was paganism. It was full of sacrifice. They would sacrifice children to Molech. That's a false deity.
Mm.
Yeah, that just shows how deceived
exactly,
people.
But they were still willing to do it, and to me, they're doing a more of a sacrifice than actually sacrificing themselves. Because
this is bad. This is bad logic, I'm afraid.
Well, hold on, John.
Have you got children?
Yes.
No. Just think about Abraham.
Would you die for your children? Would you die for your children?
If I was an evil pagan, and I thought that killing my firstborn child would bring me riches, and I wasn't a Christian, I might be tempted to do it back in the day. That's John, they all did it.
John, out of fairness, how did Abraham separate himself to God besides leaving his homeland of Ur when God told him to? He was willing to sacrifice his only son, Isaac, to prove his faith to God. And then God stopped the sacrifice because God isn't an evil pagan deity. But we can't say that isn't the ultimate testimony of faith. And God himself sacrificed in Jesus. So, I mean, I'm not trying to, get totally distracted by the sacrificing of a child if it's more of an act of faith than sacrificing yourself or not. But I think we have to acknowledge, if we're Christians, that Abraham willing to sacrifice Isaac was the thing that led God to choose him, so it's obviously significant to God himself.
But Ryan, Abraham believed that Isaac would be resurrected.
Yeah, I know he did.
So that was his faith. That he was, God stopped him from carrying it out, but he believed that he was going to be a father of many nations, through Isaac. So then God says, you need to sacrifice him. So he's thinking, well, okay, I've got to do it because that's what God said, but he'll have to bring him back alive. And of course,
I don't think any of this though is good evidence, because I think what we've proved here with our conversation is that there is lots of beliefs and religions that will do exactly the same thing as your saying that the Christians did, which is the proof of their faith and proof that or evidence that the religion or the beliefs is true. And we've just demonstrated that there's multiple faiths, religions, beliefs that people will do equally the same things.
That's not true, though. That's not true. Well, that's not true.
Well, what's different that the Christians do that the other beliefs and religions don't do?
I explained to you that there's a difference between sacrificing your child or a stranger to a pagan god. That's different to you selling all your stuff, holding it all in common because you now believe in Christ. And then when a pagan comes along and says, right, you need to start worshiping the pagan gods or we're going to kill you, and you don't recant your faith. That is a testimony that you really do believe because it's easy to, if you're not going to suffer personally.
It's that they believe.
It's not a problem,
not
is it?
that it's true, though. It's not evidence that it's true. It's just evidence that they truly believed it, and,
Exactly.
and I don't dispute that.
Yeah.
I think all religions, the people that are in them religions, they truly believe that their religion is true. So just that the fact that you can demonstrate that these people truly believe it, that is not evidence that the belief is true.
Yeah, now we're getting into a different debate, because you started off saying about Jesus being a mythical figure.
All right,
Yeah.
but hold on, Paul. One thing I have to say to you as a rebuttal is you have to be objective enough to tell us the one thing that you would say is a testimony to a true faith. Because to me, John, and everyone, you included, we know that being willing to sacrifice yourself is a huge sacrifice, because that's all we have. And just like John 15:13 says, you know, there's no greater love than to lay down your life for your friends. We can all look at people in World War II or anywhere, any war. You were in the, military. You know what it's like. If you're willing to sacrifice yourself for somebody, that's a great act of sacrifice and heroic. And it does prove a dedication to a cause or a purpose. So you'll agree on that, but you also have to give us what we can show you or demonstrate to you through the Bible or through our faith journeys, supernatural personal experiences, that would be persuasive to you. Because I think the problem with atheism is it's kind of like going to eat with somebody at a restaurant, and you ask them what they want to eat, and they look at the menu and they don't tell you. So you tell us, what is one thing that we could show you that would be persuasive to you?
I think that's an impossible question to answer. What would convince me that any particular religion was true? I wouldn't know until the evidence was presented. That's the only way I would know, is once the evidence is presented to me and it's convincing, that will be it. I think it's very difficult to come up with something that may be presented to me in the future that would convince me. I don't know what that would look like.
Well, Paul, don't you see that as just death by the Socratic method, essentially? That
No, because I'm being told, but that a God exists. Whether it's a Christian God or any of the other gods that we've had, I'm basically being told that a God exists, and then I'm being told that this is the evidence that it's true. And the evidence that I'm being presented with, to me, isn't convincing in the slightest. I don't find any of it even remotely convincing. So I'm not convinced that a God exists, and that's basically the position that I'm in.
I know, but I'm just saying your own ideology is almost impossible for us to do anything with, because, like I said, I asked you just to give us one thing, and in your entire life there hasn't been one thing that you can think of. And I'm not trying to insult you. No. I'm just saying I'm trying to show you the obstacle you're giving us to overcome is near impossible. That's what I'm trying to say. If you don't have one thing that we can even aim to show you as proof, then you're basically just, like I said, almost married to the Socratic method of I know nothing and going to drink the hemlock and die in that, So what can we do? Is it's hard when you don't have one thing that would really prove something to you. So when John talks about the martyrs, or he can name another 100 things that are significant to me and him. If you don't think those things are significant, where are we going to go with it? So I would hope you could try to think about one thing. And I know you just said when it presented itself, but that's almost like, you got to you got to help us a little and meet us in the middle in order for us to bring it up,
Yeah, we can't really talk. There's no point talking about the Bible, anything about the Bible, Paul.
Yeah,
Christianity. There's no point.
Yeah, that is true. The Bible's not going to convince me, and I find the stories in the Bible too supernatural, but they're also you can see how they date back to 2,000 years ago. The stories, there's nothing in the Bible that's presented that is sort of like new and inspiring and go, wow. Now, if we didn't have the Bible, we wouldn't know this, and we now know this because it's written in the Bible. Everything that's written in the Bible, when it comes to how we progressed in our knowledge of the earth, the universe, and everything else, it's turned out that the bits that are in the Bible are actually wrong. Just the first bit about saying about the earth was created first and then the sun was created afterwards, we know that in reality, that is the opposite way around. All the scientists say the sun was created first, and then the earth would have come after. That's completely the opposite to what the Bible would say.
Well, hold on. I want John to get back and talk to you. I just wanted to ask you or add this one thought for us all. Just tell us what God would have to do in your life, if not the Bible. Just let's not even worry about the Bible and if it's true or not. Just tell us, because like I said, I wanted you to try to give us one thing that we could show you that would persuade you as far as, to bring you to faith. What would God have to do to make you believe in him? Would he have to sit in the room and be a voice? Would you have to see lightning bolts? Would you have to see a rainbow that said Paul? Like, I'm not trying to be sarcastic or dumb about it. I'm being really serious.
I get that. And
like we did. Like, what would God have to do? What's the standard? What's the criteria? In all seriousness, because we want you to find God.
And if God was to, speak to me as such, I would accept that. I wouldn't be like what Matt Dillahunty would say, which would be that I could be having a delusion, and he even dismisses that because he could be having a delusion. Now, if God or Jesus was to speak to me, I wouldn't automatically go with that as a delusion. I would accept it on face value. So that would be convincing to me. Something along them lines might work.
Go ahead, John, because I wasn't.
Yeah. I mean, I was a staunch atheist until about 12, 13 years ago.
Ah, right, brilliant. So what convinced you? The one bit
I started seeking answers because I was very dissatisfied with life. I thought there had to be something more. There had to be a higher purpose to life. Otherwise, what is the point, Paul? Are we just here to enjoy ourselves and then we turn back to worm food? Is that the purpose? So you just fit in as much enjoyment as you can in however many years you have?
Yeah, I mean, to me, you give life purpose itself. I've never had the feeling that you've just described. I love life. I don't think there's anything. I think life's it's amazing. Is life. Every time I wake up in the morning, I appreciate the fact that I woke up the next day and I can enjoy the next day. I'm 57. I'm obviously to the latter part of middle aged, probably growing into old age. I'm not going to live my life over again. I don't find any discomfort in growing old. I feel extremely lucky that I've got to the age that I have got. And if I am to live another 10, 20 years, if I'm lucky, then I'll appreciate them 10 or 20 years that I get. No, I don't have any dissatisfaction in life at all. I absolutely love life. I enjoy learning things. I've always had a fascinating mind. I've always had to have hobbies. I've never gone without a hobby or interest. I used to fly gliders years ago. I got my private pilot's license. I'm an amateur radio operator now. I've got all my radio equipment up the side. That's why I'm in this shed. This is my radio shed. I go shooting, mainly target shooting nowadays. I'm a member of the local gun club, and I go target shooting. I enjoy doing that. I used to keep ferrets. I used to be a falconer. I used to fly birds of prey. And the hobby literally just goes on. I mean, that's just a small amount. I've always had.
You feel completely satisfied with life?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's fine then. So I've got to ask the question: why are you here talking to two Christians?
Because I enjoy. This is another thing that I enjoy listening to people that have different beliefs than me. I like to try and get into the mindset of people that have different beliefs. Now, this doesn't have to have anything to do with religion. I enjoy topics like religion because it's a belief that I don't hold. I also enjoy going and listening to people that believe in flat Earth because it's a belief I don't hold. UFOs, conspiracy theories. I enjoy all that type of thing where people hold a different belief to what I do. Hence why I enjoy listening to and having conversations with Christians.
But the problem is, Paul, we can't really have a discussion. Really, we can't. It's pointless. It's an absolute waste of time. I'm not being rude.
I don't agree with that, but that's John's opinion.
It depends on what you're wanting to.
That's not my view. Sorry,
it's all right. No, I don't get offended. John, it depends what you're wanting out of the conversation. If you're just wanting to have a conversation as two human beings chatting and you describing what your beliefs are and what mine are, then we can have a productive conversation. If your idea to have this conversation is to try and convert me to Christianity, yes, you're probably going to fail. But the same as if I'm going to have this conversation and try and convert you to not believing, I'm going to fail. But that isn't the idea of why I come on these streams. I am not interested in trying to convert you. I'm just interested in what your beliefs and why you believe it. That's it.
To be honest, though, Ryan, you can have a different view to me. I'm just being honest. I like to be honest with things.
Yeah.
This is a place to have theological discussions, to talk about theology. How can you engage in a theological discussion if you don't even believe in God?
Well, just like we are doing now.
So the only way we can have a discussion is if we basically analyze your atheism. There's no point us talking about the teachings of Jesus, or what did Paul teach on grace, or, the Trinity or Unitarian positions, there's no point. But
well, no, because
you can't contribute in that. But the only thing we can talk about is God real? Is God a real concept? That's the only thing we can talk about. Do you agree?
Yes, that is one of the things we could talk about.
I think the only talk about, how big London is, or what's the best place to get.
I'm sure you've got many people in your life that don't hold a religious belief, and you have conversations with them.
Oh yeah, I just thought this was a place for theological discussions.
But John, before when you were an atheist, because I was never an atheist in my life. I was a Christian until 5 years ago, six years ago, and a month or two. But what did you do when you were an atheist? You never came around any sort of religious, studies or shows or books or anything?
I hated it, Ryan, and
really?
I hated Christianity with a passion. I thought it was unscientific. I thought it was illogical. I thought it was unreasonable. I thought it was stupid. I thought to be a Christian, you had to be stupid.
Wow.
Honestly, I thought it was a complete delusion, because everything in my life from my schooling contradicted it. All of that brainwashing that I went through my culture. The theory of evolution, for example. Well, if the theory of evolution is true, that means the Bible is a lie.
No, it doesn't. I would never use evolution or the Big Bang as an argument against religion. Evolution could be perfectly true. It just means that God set it off. The Big Bang could be perfectly true. It just means that God set it off. It might mean that certain beliefs in your religion might be wrong, but I would never use them as an argument against a religion. That's
what I said, though, Paul, was it would prove the Bible was completely wrong, which would mean.
But we already know that.
Is completely
wrong.
But
we already know there's parts in the Bible that are wrong.
Well, I disagree. Right. I disagree with that statement.
Right. The flood, right? The flood. We have. I don't think there's any argument when it comes to history and people that understand about how the planet works, that the flood never happened. Now, there may have been a local flood, but was the whole Earth flooded? No.
Yes. Yes, it was.
You believe that, but all the animals were on one boat, which this boat's 450 foot long, which we know even now with modern technology, we cannot make a wooden boat 450 foot long. It would not float. It would flex too much. It would let in too much water. Then there's just the logistics of looking after all them animals. And then 4,000 years ago, 4,500 years ago, this boat, sets down on dry land. Now, the whole of the Earth, it's been underwater for a year. The whole of the Earth, there'll be no plants, no nothing. Nothing would be growing, and everything that's alive is on this boat. Now, then it moves. All the animals move out of the boat. I've got no idea what they're feeding on, because there wouldn't be any plant life because it's been underwater for the last year. So there'll be no plant life there for these animals. And then these animals have got to travel this vast amount of distances. And it's funny that you don't have. The animals are in their own different regions. They're not all mixed up, which you would imagine they would be if you were to open the the gates of a zoo now and allow all the animals to come out, it'd be just a mess of animals. It just, none of it makes sense. And then you've got the fact that we know we breed animals, we study on how animals live. And if you've got 2 animals left, that species is dead. It's absolutely dead. The black rhino, I believe that's gone extinct now. And I think when I was a kid, I think there was about 8 or 9 left. The population was just way too small for it to survive. And I believe that the black rhino has now gone extinct.
Hold up, Paul. Can I just interject?
Yeah.
Well, humanity started with Adam and Eve.
Exactly. It wouldn't work.
Okay. So you reject Adam and Eve. You see, this is the point.
But we do know. This is
the only thing we can talk about, Paul, to have an intelligent discussion is God real? Because every point I'm going to come out against you with, which is based on the Bible, you just say, well, I don't believe the Bible. So the only meaningful discussion we can honestly have is there a God?
I don't believe
Obviously,
so.
you say that. So you say there's no God. So how did life originate, in your view?
Well, you're talking about abiogenesis, and even the scientific community doesn't know how the first life actually came into existence.
So there's a mystery. There's a mystery. Do you believe in the Big Bang?
No, not really. No.
So, but how did all the material come to be?
I don't know. I don't know.
How do you think it's feasible that out of nothing life can just spontaneously happen?
Yeah, but they don't say it's from nothing, do they?
Well, you kind of just said that there was a moment where there was no life. There's a moment where there was no life.
So no life to some life. Yes, that is possible, because they have. I've forgotten what the name of it is. The actual, the very, very basic building blocks of life. They have managed to replicate that. They can't get it to get to life, but they can get the basic first building blocks there of life.
But I've just realised something. You've kind of undone your earlier argument about the ark, and when you've got 2 animals. You're saying it started with no animals, and you just had one living whatever it was. Well, that's just completely disproved your argument about the ark.
Well, no, because the very earliest type of life wasn't anything like what we have now. It's a very basic cell, so that you've got
like an amoeba.
Amoeba. And then it splits, and then now 2, and then it splits, and then
an amoeba. Yeah.
Yes.
You think everything came from an amoeba?
I don't know. I don't know if anything came from that.
Do you not see that that's totally ridiculous? A ridiculous thing.
What that I don't know.
No, that all life came from an amoeba.
I don't know whether that is the case, though.
So I'm not arguing. But this is the argument I'm putting. It can't be. It just doesn't work.
All this basically, it's just put it to the chase. All this is going to be is the God of the gaps argument. You're getting to me to a point where I say I don't know, and then all you do is insert God. That's all that's going to happen here.
Well, yeah, we do have
we don't know how life. Yeah, but
I have a narrative that makes sense. You don't have a narrative. You don't even have a narrative.
You've got a supernatural being that started everything off. We don't even know the supernatural exists. We don't even know that your God exists. Now,
at least I have a narrative. You don't even have a narrative.
I'm living proof that the
supernatural. I don't. Me personally, no, I don't, because I don't know. I cannot say how life first got started. I do not know. And as far as I'm aware, science has its theory of how life got started, but I'm not educated.
Yeah, but that theory doesn't work, Paul. I've just shown you.
But I'm not necessarily arguing for that theory. That's one answer that how life could have begun.
Well, we've discounted that one. We couldn't all start from an amoeba. That doesn't work. That can't work. So there isn't really any other options other than God.
There'd be a lot of scientists. There's a lot of scientists and more educated people than me and you would disagree with you on that point.
Like Richard Dawkins.
I don't particularly like Richard Dawkins, to be fair. I don't think he puts up very good arguments. I think he could do a much
even
better
Richard
job.
Dawkins, because it's so obvious there's design. It's the more we understand about human cell, any cell, how complicated they are, the machinery involved. It is absolutely obvious there's a designer. So even Dawkins is saying that life was seeded from aliens. That's his answer. Do you believe that? Is that a possible answer?
Well, it is a possible answer, but then it would be, where did the aliens come from? So all you're doing is just moving it backwards. So the aliens would be alive. So whether it's seeded from aliens or not still wouldn't answer the question.
Given the context of that science, does it really seem that ridiculous that there is a deity, an almighty designer that's designed everything? Is it totally ridiculous?
Yes, until demonstrated to be at least a possibility, and I don't even see it as a possibility.
But the absolute. So do you believe do you reject there's a designer?
I don't see design in it. No.
Right. Well, in that case, you've made your mind up. You see, the Apostle Paul, he writes about this, and he says that the creation reveals God. So you look at anything in creation, the complexity of it. You look at a bird. You kept birds. You look at a bird's feather under a microscope. And how it's almost like Velcro, yeah?
Yeah.
You've got little hooks. The complexity of the design is incredible. You look at anything, any living creature, and how complex it is.
But we can see the
absolutely
different,
has to be designed for.
But we can see the different levels. Like the feather is a good example. It's made of exactly the same thing that your nails are made from, which is exactly the same things of what the scales are made from. Now, a bird, prime example, it's got feathers. It's also got nails on it, especially birds of prey, got talons, which is made of the same type of stuff. And also on its legs, it's got scales, which is made of the same type of things. So if you've got a creature that's got scales, it only takes a very slight change in the DNA sequence or whatever for that scale not to be a scale anymore and to be feather-like. And then as
no, Paul, it doesn't work like that. Evolution is time. It doesn't suddenly go from being a scale to
no. It doesn't. It doesn't suddenly do it. No, it does it very slowly. You would never be able to see the point where it's very difficult to explain on how it's been explained to me. There's no specific point where it changes. It's a very slow progression. Feathers
so
originally.
You do believe in evolution, then, Paul? You do believe in evolution?
Well, yeah, but I mean, evolution is a fact. It's not a belief about it. I'm not saying that evolution is the answer to everything, but we know evolution happens. We manipulate evolution to breed the different types.
That's just gene expression. It's not evolution.
That's change over time, so it's evolution by.
Evolution is tiny, minuscule changes by genetic mutation. It's like an accident. And then because it gives a tiny alleged advantage, it doesn't work. Again, that one doesn't work. I'm an atheist. I was an atheist. So I know all these arguments inside out, but they don't work. That's the thing.
Why
honestly
doesn't it work?
Okay. So you made that example of a scale, yeah? There's a lizard with a scale.
Yeah.
And over billions of years, that turns into feathers.
Yes, but not to the feathers like you're thinking about flight feathers. It would be more or very similar to what you get on like an emu or even a penguin.
The first time there's a slight genetic mutation, which is a fault, and the design is to correct those faults. The cell should die, but for some reason the mutation stays. And that little scale, hang on, Paul. That little scale is slightly more pronounced by, say, 1 millimeter than normal. What advantage would it give that lizard?
It could be possibly better protection. It could be warmth.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't give it any protection. It wouldn't give it any advantage. It's actually made the design worse.
It doesn't give it any advantage, but it also doesn't give it a disadvantage. Then that mutation could stay because it's not.
But that's undone the whole theory, because the whole theory is it has an advantage and then it has more survivability.
No, you can have mutation which is an advantage, a disadvantage, or neutral. It could be a neutral thing.
Right.
It's like our eye colours. Our eye colours originally so they say, were originally brown, and then they can date roughly when the first blue eye came along. Was it an advantage or a disadvantage? It probably was neutral, probably didn't make no difference, which is why we've got blue, brown, green eyes nowadays.
Yeah. So we did all come from an amoeba.
I had no idea.
Brian, I did come on here. I don't mean to be rude, Paul, but I came on to have a theological discussion with you. I honestly don't want to be talking about this stuff. We're not going to get anywhere, Paul.
That's absolutely fine, it's absolutely fine. And I didn't mean to come on and try and upset anybody or anything like that. I enjoy having a conversation. I'm going to jump off anyway.
No. Paul, let me just say this, and just for the record, you're always welcome. And John, I hope you also see the side of it where me and you could have a theological discussion right now, John, but would that be the highest calling that God would want from us? Or would it be to try to bring someone towards what we know is the truth, the light, the way, and the truth, Jesus? So I personally kind of disagree with you in this regard, John, that me and you having a theological discussion would be more important or better use of our time. I think the best use of our time would be being, doing our best to try to get Paul towards where we're at. But I think what you're doing, John, is reasonable in assessing that you don't think this guy's, been in this doctrine for so long. He's kind of openly admitted he's not going to move today. That I see where you're coming from too. You know what I mean? I'm not saying you're crazy, you're out of your mind. You know what I mean?
Paul, and I was never.
If Paul was to come on here and say, if you were to come here and say, you know what, I'm actually open. I can see there's some big holes in evolution. It doesn't really make sense that we all came from amoeba. I don't really know.
Yeah,
I'm open.
That is my position.
To me, you haven't given me any indication that you're open at all. From my perspective.
That's fair enough. But I also did say that I would never use evolution or the Big Bang as an argument against God. I wouldn't use it as an argument against it. I don't think the argument fits because God could have started either of them two off, and not a problem as far as I'm concerned.
I think we have to, like I said, kind of just almost work backwards, Paul. And like I said, you have to tell us, because this is something that you have to lead us on what we could do to help show you what we already believe and know in our hearts. You would have to again go through what does God have to do? What is his requirements of Paul? Is like you said already, you'd have to hear a voice. So then I'd have to get you to elaborate on that. Well,
I'm not saying that would be the only thing. That would work as far as I'm concerned. If God or Jesus or anything like that was to come and speak to me, I'd have to take it at face value. And to me, I think it would convince me.
What if somebody else had a firsthand witness with God, like somebody you loved and trusted, like your wife? Would that convince you if she told you, or no? I'm just asking you these hypotheticals to try to gauge how far we would have to go, or what we would have to do.
I don't know if that would.
Yeah, I agree. Probably
it wouldn't have happened to me. I don't know if that would be good enough to convince me.
I think the issue, Paul, is like what you were saying earlier. I don't think you see any need for God in your life.
No, I don't see a need for a God. No, not whatsoever.
And then, until this is the thing, in order to seek God, you have to feel a need for God. So if you're very satisfied, you feel no need for God, you're very happy in your life and you're happy with your worldview, there's no need for you to seek God or call out to God or explore the possibility that God is real.
You would agree with what you're saying there, right, Paul?
I agree. Yes, I pretty much agree with what you're saying there, yeah.
Because
I don't seek out the God. I just seek out better understanding of people with religious beliefs, better understanding of what their position is.
Well, Paul, I just want to point out what John's saying and the importance of what he's saying. Because if you were to do anything else in life, if you were to try to join the basketball team and your attitude was, well, I don't really care if I make the basketball team, you're probably not going to make the basketball team because you're not going to put in the time to practice. And I don't need to list 1,000 other examples and say, if you're trying to learn how to cook, you don't need to read the cookbook. Like we get my point already and John's point already. So all me and John are trying to say is you should in your heart, at least at some point, and you've probably already done this in your life, but maybe just be open to doing it again. You should take a serious attempt at having an open heart and praying, because if you want God to talk to you as a voice, you have to also meet him halfway at least and get on your knees and pray and ask him to do that. When is the last time you've got on your knees and prayed and asked God to do that?
I haven't. I've never held a religious belief ever.
What if you were God though? Would it be reasonable for you to, of all people on earth, choose a prophet for a person that's not even trying to contact you or pray to you or give you any reverence? Like, would that be logical for God to choose you, or would it be more logical for him to choose somebody that's actually, pursuing him?
No, actually, it'd probably be more logical for him to approach somebody like me. Because if you convert me, there's enough people in my life that know the position that I'm in, and they're also in. Most people in my life are in a pretty similar position as me. If I was to suddenly become convinced, I think there'd be a lot of shocked people.
I actually agree with you on that. And after I said what I said, I kind of realized that that's pretty much what Christ did. He went and got the sinners and all the people that, he didn't go to the people that were the priests or the Pharisees. He went to the people like the tax collectors, and and God went to like a shepherd in the Old Testament who wasn't even, studying as a priest. He was just a shepherd. So I really put my foot in my mouth in what I said there. So I apologize
no
about that. Like God himself doesn't work in that manner. So I apologize. I represented God poorly there. But you could also acknowledge as a human being, it wouldn't be a bad thing for you to make an honest attempt at some point, I would hope. But I think John's also saying that you seem pretty content with where you're at, but you shouldn't be content with where you're at, because there is more of a, deeper aspect to life. And there's a life after this life that if you want to get closer to the creator of that life and to like John said, give almost let mankind who's done nothing but make mistakes and errors throughout the entire human history and told lies or deceptions or whatever, or just been foolish from ignorance, to let them convince you that some sort of biological germ, amoeba, whatever you want to call it, created everything instead of an intelligent, creative being. That's kind of a very you got sold a bag of dirt when you were trying to buy some gold. I mean, that my opinion.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, things are either naturally created or they're created by a creator. And yeah, to me, everything that I see, experience is natural, and none of it is supernatural.
Well, it would be supernatural for life to begin from nothing. That is inherently supernatural.
No, not necessarily. We just maybe don't understand the mechanism of how it works at the moment. If you take somebody who's doesn't have any education in biology or anything like that, you can take a jar, fill it with water, put it on the side, let the sun shine into it, and green algae will start to grow. And you'll even, if you've got a bucket outside, you'll even get Daphne, basically the water flea, will suddenly turn up. And even that baffles me, is how the hell does that turn up? But it does, out of the air. And you've got life in a bucket, but you started just with a bucket of water. Once you look into on how that works, with how photosynthesis works and how it reacts with the water, and then that gets the algae, and then however it is that the Daphne ends up in the water, even I'm still not aware of how that works, but it does.
What about, Paul, what about DNA? Because that has to be written. It's coded.
No, I don't believe that DNA is coded. What we've done is we've looked at DNA and we've given it the code. Is there 4 letters in the DNA coding? It's given us 4 letters. Obviously, there isn't really 4 letters there.
You don't think it's a code?
No, what it is
we can overwrite the code now. We can do gene editing and insert new code.
Yeah, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's the same as a code like a computer code. I wouldn't say it's the same as that.
Well, you have to. This is the thing. You have to deny it.
Understand on get down to the basics of it, and then to write that down and to describe it to somebody, it becomes a code. But is it actually a code? No, I don't agree that it is.
That's why they call it DNA code and genetic code. Yeah. It is a code. It is written.
Yeah,
you can change it.
That they use that word.
Let me talk. I think you're reacting now because DNA is the massive thing you don't want to accept. DNA is absolute proof of a designer, 100%.
Right.
And this is why you don't want to listen to my words, because it is absolute proof that there is a designer, because the code had to be written. Do some research into it, Paul. Don't believe me. Go away from this stream and start Googling.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen
up DNA being a written code, and then start asking some questions.
Yeah, I have seen scientists talking about DNA and about coding, and the person that was talking about it was saying that it probably was a bad move by using the word code. I'll have to try and find the guy who was talking about it. He was a scientist. He was talking about the DNA coding and explaining on the sequence and all that. And he totally explains it as being a natural thing. And he did say the use of the word code was probably the biggest mistake they ever did by using the word code.
They use the word code because it is a code.
It's
because you can change the code. Hang on, Paul, let me make the point.
Explaining it.
Paul, let me make the point. I know you're finding this upsetting because it's going against
because it makes no difference to me whether.
Okay, then listen. When you change the code, you change the characteristics of the being. That proves it's a code. It is written. It is a code. It's a genetic code. Now, you're so set in your atheism that you don't want to accept it, but you're trying to pretend to be scientific. You're fooling yourself, Paul. Honestly,
I'm not, because like I say, I don't use these. These are things that I would use as an argument against a religion.
But no, we've gone away from religion now. We're trying to establish: is there a designer
or a god? Yeah, a designer, a god.
Well, there has to be a designer. Otherwise, how did the code get written in the first place?
Like I say, the way I've had it described to me is it's not a code. We subscribe it as a code, as a way of explaining what it is. Like I said, the DNA code, it has four letters, I believe, in it. Obviously, there isn't really 4 letters there. We've given these particular things 4 letters as a way of explaining it. You break anything down to its basic parts, it will then become, if you try and write down what it is and how it all goes together, it's going to come across as a code, even though it actually isn't a code.
Paul, you need to do. Don't just listen. Right, you've listened to an atheist scientist who probably hates God, maybe like a Dawkins type, and then because of your dogma, you're just believing him. You need to go away and do your independent research. And if you genuinely want to come into the truth, I think, Ryan, this is what this conversation comes down to. Yeah. And this is why I stopped being an atheist, okay? Because I knew I was believing a load of lies. Yeah. I started thinking and realizing I was being lied to. I've been lied to my whole life. And I started asking questions, genuine questions, not questions like to reconfirm my existing dogma, actually challenging my views. And then God could reveal himself to me. He cannot reveal himself to you, Paul. Not a chance. He won't. Why should he? Because you want to disprove him. That's your dogma. Until you open your mind to the possibility, then you might start seeing the actual evidence. There is abundance evidence for God. It takes way more faith to be an atheist than to be a theist. I guarantee you.
I don't
guarantee you. We've proved it in this conversation. I have a narrative how life began.
Yeah,
you have to believe you don't.
But we can explore that narrative that you've given. If you've only got 2 animals, regardless of what animals they are, mammals, for
Adam and Eve. Let's start with Adam and Eve.
The species is dead. If you've only got 2, the species is dead.
Let's start with Adam and Eve. That's where the story begins with in Genesis. Adam and Eve.
Yes. So if you only start with two animals, a male and female, and that's all you've got left of them animals. That species is finished.
Well,
right?
let's just stick with Adam and Eve.
But
let's stick with Adam and Eve. Let's work it through from Adam and Eve.
How many children did Adam and Eve have?
2.
Well, 3 technically, because after Cain killed Abel, they had another one.
So where did Cain and Abel get their children from?
That is a good question, to be fair.
No, it's not, because if you read the Bible already states this. Again, is why I wouldn't use this as an argument against it, but Christians use it quite a lot. You start off with Adam and Eve, but if you actually read the Bible didn't just say there was Adam and Eve. The story is about Adam and Eve, but then Cain and Abel left to go find brides or marriage from other tribes around them.
Murdered Abel, and he found a wife. So yes, we don't read it.
So there must have been more. There must have been more than just Adam and Eve in the beginning. If you actually read the Bible, there must have been more than just Adam and Eve in the beginning, and then the 2 sons, Cain and Abel. Because Cain and Abel left to go find brides from the tribes around them. So where were they from? So they must have already been there in the first place. So there must have been more than just Adam and Eve.
It's a good point. To be honest, Paul, I'd never thought about that. But you are right. Because from my understanding, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam and Eve, they only had 3 sons. And one of them obviously was murdered.
Yeah.
So all you had was Cain and Seth.
Seth, yeah.
Yeah, Cain left and went and got a wife. So yes, what I believe, Paul, from my understanding, is Adam and Eve were still the first people that God created, but there were other people that, Cain could go to and get a wife after them, but Adam and Eve were still the beginning. But at the same time, if you read the Bible hyper literally, you're never gonna believe it, because you can't read it in that manner, because so much of it is allegory and also just trying to explain things deeper. Like the way I read Genesis, I read the fact that Adam and Eve were in the garden of Eden, which was in a heavenly realm. And then because of the sin, they fell to earth. And I know other people read it differently and make the argument that the Garden of Eden was, on earth, because certain verses will have like certain rivers that are on earth now. But there's also a tree of life in the Garden of Eden, and I don't know where that is on earth. And there's also a guardian cherub reading it. So there's so much, like, there's a wealth of, there's books and limitless novels worth of information in Genesis, just in the first few chapters. And we can't, say one of us knows it and the other one doesn't, because none of us know it perfectly. But what we have to do is be very open-minded and understand what we are exegeting as an ancient text. And if we read it all hyper literally, like we're in second grade, and I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but I'm just saying hyper literally like a second grader, we're definitely not going to be able to believe it, because it's not going to add up. But if we read it from a spiritual, ideology, we're going to see it differently. Like we'll look at things like, the tree of good and evil, and we won't have to be stuck and handcuffed to the fact, like, well, it has to be a certain type of tree. It can't be this kind of tree. It has to be 20 feet tall. It can't be 5 feet tall. Like, everybody can have a different, I think that's the beauty of it too, and the best poetry, the best knowledge is concise knowledge, but it's also knowledge that allows you to think and have an imagination yourself. So if you look at an infinite mind of an infinite creator, it's going to tell a story in a manner that, is going to reflect what it is. So, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, if you ask 100 Christians how big it is, we don't know. We all have our own, idea of what it is. And some people will give you a different and just say the tree is just a metaphor for the concept itself, and I don't go that far. I think there's an actual tree, but I don't know.
I would say that, it'd be more of a metaphor than it would actually be a literal tree and a serpent. And I'd say I've heard it argued more than, as like you say, as a metaphor for morality type thing, rather than an actual tree.
Like going through Genesis, because I agree with you. If you go to the story of Noah and the ark and the animals, you can just read it from a very hyper literal perspective, and you're gonna bump your head and say, this is stupid. This is
it doesn't work.
A little kid could write a book that's more believable than this type of thing. But if you start using your imagination and you're a little more open-minded about it, you can, walk through the story too, because, again, everything doesn't have to be literal. And I do believe Noah's Ark is describing some literal events about God sparing a righteous man, Noah, and his family, and preserving animals and putting them in an ark, or in whatever manner that is. If you look at that same Hebrew word for ark that's used for Noah, it's the same thing as the basket that in Hebrew. It's the same word for the basket that Moses was put in.
Moses, yeah.
Yeah, when he was spared. So we also have to understand the range of this language, and we're reading it and we don't know, what the authors are really trying to say all the time too. So we gotta really, be open-minded is all I gotta say about it. I think sometimes atheists, they're so ready to just, we all have egos at the end of the day, and I'm not saying that's where you're coming from. So please don't take any of this as personal.
No, you're right. We do. We all do.
Yeah, we all have egos, and we want to be right. Nobody argues to be wrong. So, we can approach these things, like I said, in one manner just to make ourselves right, but we can also be self-defeating in that too. And I think Genesis particularly. I'm not saying the whole Bible, but I would say the whole Bible is good to read from an open-minded imagination perspective, along with the literal perspective, because within the whole narrative, there's layered duality. For instance, like what I was going to get into here today in Exodus 15, Moses throws a log into some bitter waters and the waters turn sweet. After they leave Egypt, there's 3 days they don't have any water. He throws a log in the water and then the waters become sweet. And if you look into the New Testament, Christ dies on what? A tree, which that's what they call it in some of the scriptures, a tree, but it's obviously, him getting crucified on some wood. And in Zechariah 12:10-13:7, it says, they'll look on him whom they have pierced, and on that day a fountain of water will be released for the forgiveness of sins to the house of David. So basically, just like in Exodus 15:3, where the Israelites, the water goes from bitter to sweet after 3 days, Christ goes in the grave for 3 days. Like, we always have to read the Bible looking for those sorts of connections that are like thinking outside of the box and not just reading it literally and saying, well, one guy, Moses, threw a log into the water and the water went from bitter to sweet, and that could have nothing to do with Christ dying on a cross thousands of years later. Like, we all are intelligent enough to realize, like, it's good to look for those type of puzzles and connections and deeper meanings, because God's writing this for a reason. And those are the type of things, when you start to believe in God, that you'll start to see all throughout the Bible, and you'll really appreciate it more than just reading it from I want to, prove this wrong and say, oh, how could a guy part a sea with a staff,
Can I ask you a question, Paul?
Yes, and then I'm going to have to shoot.
Okay. Obviously, the Christian message and how it's unique as a religion, yeah? About Christ dying for sin.
Yeah.
Do you?
I wouldn't particularly call it unique, though. Every religion is different, so everyone, I suppose, is unique to some degree.
I think having a savior that dies for your sin, I don't think that's in any other religion.
No, probably not.
I think it is unique. Do you? Does that convict you in any way? That it's just for argument's sake, say it's true. I know you don't believe, but just for working out in your mind, that God did create a son. That's a whole other thing, but just say he did. And he allowed that son to be tortured to death so that you could be forgiven of every wrong thing you've ever done in your life, in God's eyes. Does that not make you think that there's something to look into here?
No, I'd have to say, what kind of a God would do that?
Well, it was a proof of love for you. Because when
if somebody was to torture and kill, I mean, I'm looking at it as a father's point of view. For somebody to kill and torture their child, for me, That
Well,
wouldn't make.
first of all, God didn't
that
do
would
it.
be-
God didn't do it. He allowed it.
He allowed it to happen.
Yeah, he could have stopped it, of
Yeah.
course, because he's God.
And
But
I'm
there's
sure
a
he could have found
reason he
another
allowed
way.
it.
I'm sure he could have found another way to get his message across rather than creating this person to suffer and then die horrifically.
Now you're trying to be God. You're trying to tell God what to do. Maybe it was the only way.
No, it doesn't mean I'm trying to be God. It means I can judge him, though. I'm permitted to judge God. Absolutely. If he does something that I feel that is abhorrent, then I can say that.
So
you might disagree with me.
Okay.
But
Do you let me phrase it just slightly differently? Put it a slightly different way. Say you have been created by a perfect God who's morally perfect, yeah?
Mm.
And you do something wrong in your life.
Mm.
That God is so perfect that when he sees you and he sees the horrible thing you've done, do you think he has a right to be angry with you?
No.
Why not?
Because if I've done wrong to anybody, the person I've done wrong to is the one that has the right to be angry, not God.
Ah, right. But that's okay. But
and he can't
the
forgive
one
me.
you've done wrong to, the person you've done wrong to is loved by God as his child. You've wronged a child of God.
I mean, I can't think of anything that I've done that's as bad as you. The story
Here's the thing, Paul.
the narrative you're trying to give.
When you're dealing with a perfect, morally perfect God, even just saying something nasty to somebody and making them feel bad, that is a serious crime in his eyes. You've hurt one of his children.
Yeah, but if you read the Bible, he's done all them things as well to other human beings, which is exactly the same.
No, he hasn't done it.
Yes, he has. He brought the plagues and everything upon. He also hardened Herod's heart, didn't he? He was about to let. Yeah, he was about to let the.
Are you saying he doesn't have the right to punish?
Well, if you go to somebody and say, "I want you to do this," and they're about to do it, but yet you have the power to harden their heart so they don't do it, then is that person to blame? Because I hardened his heart, I would say no. He's not. He's now innocent. It's now all on you. The second that you harden somebody's heart, who is about to do what you want them to do, then everything in there on after is your fault, not the person's that you've just hardened the heart of.
It depends how he hardened his heart.
It doesn't matter how he did it. If he deliberately hardens his heart, knowing that he is now going to go against him because he wants to now flex his muscles to show how big and clever he is, it's all on him. It's not on the person that's hardened the heart. Can't be.
That's the thing. Like the way some people have taught scriptures has really shaped where a lot of us view these scriptures. For a long time, that was the story that I always heard, and people always, ran with it as far as, that's a deterministic thing God did. But, and, who are we to question it? But if you look at that Hebrew word that's used for hardening God's heart, which is the way the English translations translate it, most of them hardening, it's the same word that's used for strengthening. So in the book of Joshua and all over the Bible, that same Hebrew word is where God is telling Joshua, be strong and have courage. I'll show you right now in the interlinear that the word is used in that manner. It's used in other manners. So you got to realize that a translator made a selective choice to use hardening. And it might not be the right word, but it might further what their own denomination teaches as far as free will or determinism. So they might have had a bias to choose hardening, but really if you look at it as the word strengthening, which that word means strengthening in a lot of contexts, then you could look at it as God strengthened Pharaoh's heart to have the ability to make this decision to rebel against God, where he was giving him ultimate free will. He wasn't forcing him to do it, but he was strengthening his heart to have the ability to do whatever he chose, and he chose wrong, and it was for God to demonstrate his power in the long run. But it was like the one thing, like you were saying here, is like you want to hold God accountable if he could change how people do things and so on and so forth. But I think even as human beings, we can see if you have a child, but yet you have the ability at any time to use mental telepathic powers to make that child do what is technically the right thing in every incident, every moment of their life, no matter what they do. At some point, greater love is to let that child choose to do it on his own, because if all you're doing the whole time is telepathically making him do what you want, then that's not really an individual creation, and that creature is not living in the true image of you, the creator, the parent. And God being our creator, us being made in his image, God gives us choice and gives us will, because if all he did is intervene and made us do the right choice, that's not love at the end of the day. That's just we're his dog, we're his animal at that point.
Yeah, but if you look at the story that we've just gone through, obviously you've got a slightly different interpretation of him. He did exactly that. He took away the free will, because the original story of that is he hardened his heart so that he didn't let the people go. So that was taking away his free will. There was also the other story. I can't remember. Was it Job or somebody who was God was having basically a bet with the devil that this particular person was he was only faithful to God because of everything that he had. So basically, he gave the devil permission to do what he wanted with him for so long to see whether he would still be faithful. I mean, that is an horrendous story. If you actually read that story, if there's any truth in that story at all, it's absolutely horrendous. He lost his whole family. He lost everything just because of a bet with the devil that was having a bet with God. It's an absolute horrendous story.
All right. We can definitely talk about that one too, but I just want to show you that.
Was it Job? Am I right in that? Was I right? Was it Job?
Yeah, it's Job.
Yeah, that's Job. But I'll answer that. I just want to show you that I'm not just making things up. See, this is you can go to the interlinear on all these Bible sites. This is the word that's translated hardening, hazak or whatever. I don't speak Hebrew, so I might have pronounced it wrong. I can hit the sound button and hear the pronunciation. But you can look at the word and you can see all the different meanings, and look at all the meanings. It shows you how many times it's used and how many ways. 48 times the word is used for strong, 47 it's used for repair. You can read 37 hold, strengthening, strengthen, harden 13 times of the 290 times it's used. So clearly when a translator makes a choice, look, prevail, encourage, take, courage, caught, stronger, hold. 52 times they have miscellaneous, meaning the translators don't know what the right translation is. So when you read these translations and you get to a point where you're questioning like the deep, religious, like, or just the moral, is this right or wrong? You always want to investigate what the meaning of the word is in the original language to the best of your ability, because you don't want to be, leaning because one word can change an entire, feeling that we have about something. So again, once you look at the etymology of this Hebrew word and you go and you can look at all the verses and all the verses it's used in, you're not stuck on just saying hardened. You could say strengthened, you could say all these different meanings. And, that's a thing I want to encourage you to take from this. But
the thing is, Ryan, the thing is, when you go to Romans 9, Paul explains that was the will of God. So, and I think this is your problem, Paul. You think God can't do what he wants. He can do anything he wants. This is his creation. He can do exactly as he wills.
Yeah, but that wouldn't make it right, would it? Now, if I could create life, or if I've got, if I create life, and that life has feelings and thoughts, and it has love and everything else, just because I've created that life, would you say that would be permissible for me to torture that life if I so wish because I created it? I would say no, that would still be morally wrong for me to do that, even though the fact that I created that life.
Well, you see, you've got an incorrect idea.
It wouldn't give me ultimate power over that life. It absolutely can't. It would be immoral to do that.
When you had your animals, could you put down an animal if you wanted to?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's your property. Yeah.
Yes.
It's exactly the same with God. All of this creation is his property. He can do what he wants with it.
But what I'm saying is that when it comes to torture, which is basically what.
So who did God torture then? Who did he torture?
I'm on about the concept of hell is what I'm talking about.
Well, now you're moving it to something else. I don't believe in
hell
is a place of eternal.
Which is fair enough.
Anyway,
But what I'm trying to say,
the point I was trying to get to is, you are worthy of death. I am worthy of death. Ryan is worthy of death. But God made a way that we could be saved from that, what we deserve. That is the Christian message. Now, Paul, if you don't think you're worthy of death, then you're not going to understand the cross. You're not going to understand the atonement of Jesus. If you think you're good, if you think you're a good guy, you've done nothing wrong, you're not worthy of death, if there is an almighty God, then you can just go to him face to face and say, you know, I've done nothing wrong. I'm perfect. Then, yeah, you don't need God. You don't need Christ. But if there is anything within your soul, when you introspect and you think, you know what, that wasn't good, and that wasn't good. I made a mistake there. I wish I could go back in time and correct that, but I can't. If you come at your life from that perspective, you might start thinking, you know what, if only there's a way that I could have that slate wiped clean and I could start again. That is the uniqueness of the Christian message.
I don't really have any guilt in my life as such. Yeah, I've made mistakes the same as everybody else done. But I've never done anything particularly bad that I would say warranted death as such. Certainly not to be tortured for eternity. If there is a God, you've never rebelled against him.
Well,
I can't rebel against something I don't believe, can I?
No, I said if there is if you actually were created by God, if, just for the sake of argument, just go with it, there actually is a God.
Yeah.
Have you rebelled against him?
No, I just haven't believed in him. I believe that he existed.
So you've denied him. That's rebellion.
No, I've never been. No, because it's not a choice. I haven't chosen.
It's a choice, Paul. I was an atheist. I was in rebellion, and then I ended my rebellion.
I don't think you can choose a belief. You either become convinced of something or you don't become convinced. I don't think you can. I can't choose tomorrow that I'm going to now start being a Christian. I'm going to believe that Christianity is true, or believe that God exists.
That's fine. But what you have to accept is, if I'm correct, if my worldview is correct, and there is a God, and Jesus was his son, and by believing in Jesus, we are saved. And if you reject that, you have to accept that is a rebellion if it's true.
No, it'd only be a rebellion if I thought it was true and I turned away from it. Then I'd be rebelling. I don't understand how
I'm here explaining to you it's true. I've given you the reasoning and you rejecting it. And if it's true, that would mean it's rebellion. You're rejecting the truth.
No, it'd mean that you failed in convincing me that it was true.
Oh, it'd be my fault then.
It would be your fault, yeah, because you failed to convince me.
What if you just don't want to be convinced, Paul?
I can't go on all night. I would have to jump out, and I've got some stuff I need to be doing.
All right. Hey, listen, we'll do this again. And one thing I would ask for you, Paul, is just so we can go further in this discussion, is really seriously take, write down on a piece of paper, whatever you got to do, take notes on your phone. Try to think of like things that God could do to convince you, because we're trying to meet you halfway, and it helps us to get an understanding of what your criteria is. So like when I asked you, would you believe if your wife or somebody you loved, told you they had a first-hand experience with God, and you said no? That gives me an understanding of where you're coming from, and it helps me, and it helps you too. So try to write down, 20 things God could do. You started with a voice in your head, elaborate on that. How many words? What does he have to say? Just so in this conversation, when we engage with you, we have a chance, because right now it's like we're really going uphill trying to convince you of something, but we need to know where you're coming from and what your criteria is. But yeah, it's awesome talking to you.
I mean, the problem, just a quick one. The problem with it is, I think if somebody's trying to convince me of Christianity or Judaism or Islam or any of the other religions, the problem is when I'm looking at the stories of them, the stories that the Bible tell me, to me it doesn't correspond with the reality that I see. Now, could a God actually exist? But it's not the Christian God. It's some sort of a God exists. I can accept that it's a possibility that there is some sort of God that exists, and possibly even that God was the reason that we've got everything that we have got. My problem is when I'm talking to people like you two, is that you're trying to convince me that this particular God fits into the Christian belief. And that's the bit that I have the problem with. I don't have a problem with the possibility of a God existing. I don't believe one does, but I'm open to the fact that it is possible that a God could exist. I just don't think, if it was going to be found out that there was a God out there, that it isn't going to fit into any of the religious categories that all these people, they happen to be right, a God exists, but the type of God, I think that everyone would be completely wrong. It wouldn't be a Christian God.
That's a starting point, man. And we can go from there, because I have a lot to say after that, and we could have a conversation after that. So that's good to hear, man, because it's a starting point. It shows you're not this atheist that's just trying to, rebel on like this satanic mission to disprove God and show God evil. But you also are showing us that you do have a problem with some of the morality that you see in the Bible. So we could have a conversation about that and try to, see if we could come to some sort of, agreement on, it's not immoral. Because I think if you do view the Bible as immoral, then it's impossible to believe in God. And I'm not saying, it's impossible, because nothing's impossible with God, but it's a bad starting point for us, because we'll have to go through each thing. Like Job, I'd love to go through Job with you and explain where I can see the wisdom in it and why it's a beautiful message, and it's not, an evil thing that God did, but it actually shows God's character and righteousness, because he trusted in Job so much that, Job, would prevail and overcome, and all these beautiful things that just shows the deepness of man and the richness of man's moral character that God put in him. But that's a long conversation, so I don't want to get into that, but I'm glad you're helping us get some starting points. Seriously, if you could take some notes and make some starting point, you're welcome every show I have. Please think about that stuff. Just help us out. Like, what would God need to do? That's the question I really want you to try to answer for me, at least. What would God need to do to prove that he's real? And what would it, and describe a little bit of what his moral standard or character would be in order for you to believe in it? Because it seems like you're having issues with the Bible, the moral character of the biblical God. Because I'd love to get into Jesus in the New Testament too, because I know sometimes people look at the Old Testament and see Jesus in the New Testament, and they're kind of, almost different. There's been philosophers over time like Marconian who say they're even different gods, which he's wrong about that, because that's a whole nother long topic. All these are long topics, but we could get into the New Testament and you could try to show us what Jesus did that was immoral to you, and do things like that. So we'll keep building on these conversations, God willing. This ain't going to be the last time we talk, man. I'm sorry we got
I'm sure it will. And the bit about you just mentioned there, I mean, Jesus did come across as a pretty good guy, to be fair. But anyway, I can't keep going. I'm going to have to shoot off. So,
all right. God bless.
See you, Paul.
Yeah. Yep.
Good
See you all later.
morning.
Have a good one. Ta-da.
Yeah, I apologize to you, John, too, because I wasn't.
Oh, how do I start? Bear with me. Let me just shut him down. Oh, that was painful, wasn't it? Hello to everybody in the chat. Brilliant. Thanks for coming along. I can understand you getting frustrated, screaming at the monitor. The problem was, as you could tell, I picked up very early on that I think John would have been very easy to upset, and it could have just turned into a dumpster fire. He'd have probably quit and done one. So I had to. I was treading carefully, and maybe I shouldn't tread as carefully as I do. And just to answer Spooky Bedder, his channel is. Bear with me. Let me just go down. It's Ryan Apologetics 747. So Ryan Apologetics 747 was the channel that I was on. It was an interesting one. Job, beautiful story. I didn't want to upset him too much, but how you can think Job is a beautiful story. It's horrendous. It's one of the most horrible stories in the Bible, if you actually look at it. I mean, he lost everything. I think he had 10 kids. All 10 kids were killed. Half his workforce was killed. His animals were either stolen or killed. Everything was destroyed. He was then covered in sores all over his body, suffered horrendously. But it's a beautiful story. It has a nice metaphor. I don't get it at all. Yeah. So, yeah, sorry about it being frustrating. I was trying to not get into a dumpster fire and try and keep it a polite conversation. Like I say, I picked up very early on, which you may have done as well at the beginning, that it wouldn't have been taking much to push John too far. And I think he would have quit and just gone, I'm not even entertaining yet. I'm off. So, yeah, I had to take it very, very carefully. But, yeah, thanks very much for coming along. Bree, thanks for coming along. Spooky Bed Air. Who else did I have? I had Randall Megley. He was here as well. Trusty Ape, you was here. So, yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much for coming along. It's been a pleasure. I'll just quickly look through Spooky Bed Air. Very painful. Yeah, it was. Then he was giving new kids and everything. I know. That doesn't... You can't replace your kids. It's... Yeah, the whole story is horrendous. In fact, I was only looking at that story a day or two back. And, it's horrendous. I don't think you can get anything beautiful out of that story. He thinks it's an amazing story, but no. And the same with the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. I should have jumped onto it earlier, but if you actually look at the different interpretations for hardened, strengthened. So, all right, then he didn't harden his heart, he strengthened his heart. Hold fast. So he held fast his heart. They all mean the same thing. He basically stopped him from doing what he wanted him to do. So if you're God, let my people go. And just as he's about to let them go, he hardens his heart, he strengthens his heart, he holds fast his heart, all the other things that were there. Don't matter which word you use, they all have the same meaning. It basically stopped him from doing what he was going to do. So that was my argument. That after that, that's down to God. That's not down to the person. If God hardens my heart, strengthens my heart to not do what he wants me to do, then that's all down on him. It's not on me in the slightest. So, yeah. So I'm going to hopefully do a few more of these because I am active on YouTube all the time, and I'm forever jumping into other people's streams, and I just let them go, and then I forget about them. I'm going to start doing this so I can put the streams on mine, so I've got the clip of it, so at least I'm putting some sort of content on my channel, because just recently I've done virtually nothing. So this is a couple that I've done now. So hopefully there'll be more to come. I'll certainly be jumping into other streams. I go into Praise's stream a lot. I'm now starting to go into this guy's stream, and there's other ones as well. So if any interesting conversations come up while I'm in them, I'm going to take them. I'm going to put them onto my channel. But anyway, I hope you all had a lovely Christmas and a great New Year, and I hope to see you all again. So on that, I will probably close this down, and I'll catch you all on the next one. I think I'll put my thing on here to close it down if I can get it to work. No, it's not there, is it? I'll just start it from the beginning. Here we go. Right, catch you all later.